The time is 10:34 hours. The place, La Val d'Almont, nearly 4 kilometers behind Allied battle lines. This is the current situation. After arriving on scene nearly a quarter hour prior, Company B split ranks and began to advance on the northern bluffs overlooking the Vale. While investigating the site of an overnight ambush on a U.S. field artillery convoy, the Americans discover the absence of several mortar tubes, much of the munitions, and a pair of wireless field radios. Shortly thereafter, a series of brief but intense skirmishes take place involving isolated elements of the German 914th Infantry Regiment, the undoubted perpetrators of the ambush. The end result has established the present disposition of forces. 3rd Platoon has overwhelmed a small detachment of Germans on the East Bluff, designated Point Amos, and occupied the hill. Likewise, the main body of Company B attained a commanding view of Almont atop Hill 146, in the process diminishing or destroying 2 separate heavy machine gun sections. As for Kampfgruppe Eckel, their size and complement remain a mystery to the GIs. The wild card in this encounter, however, is the unanticipated presence of German armor on the battlefield. The prelude to battle complete, the game is now afoot. With Point Amos now occupied, Captain Dorn does not hesitate to move forward with his plan of action. The next objective, Point Andy.
Our primary goal, at this stage, was to gain access to the West Bluff. As such, 1st Platoon began to reposition to the central ridge of Hill 146, which was adjacent to Point Andy. From there, they could provide fire support for 2nd Platoon on their dash to the irrigation ditch. During this process, we detected movement within the sparsely wooded crown of the bluff. It turned out to be a medic, administering aid to an unseen casualty. Though non-belligerent, this activity suggested that additional troops were present on the bluff and that they were concealed beneath entrenchments. As a precautionary measure, I ordered the platoon to commence laying down blind grazing fire into the tree line.
The so-called grazing fire that quickly befalls Point Andy is the most blistering concentration of arms yet to occur in this short-lived confrontation. Virtually every single weapon arrayed along the southern ridge of Hill 146 is leveled at the West Bluff. The only exceptions being the 3 mortar sections, which Dorn has elected to keep under wraps given the new development atop the opposing rise. Believing that their presence on Point Andy has not yet been compromised, the commander of the Germans' West Bluff contingent orders his men to keep their heads down and their numbers concealed. Subject to the barrage of small arms that is churning up the ground amidst their foxholes, his troops are more than happy to oblige such a request. With regards to the stragglers, Lieutenant Eckel's fear that effective cover is no longer available to them is a correct assumption. Long-range small arms fire begins to rain down on the 2 exposed mortar crews from both Hill 146 and Point Amos. Feeling the heat, the number 2 section is unable to ready their tube for action and subsequently panics. They scramble for cover inside an adjacent building. On the other hand, the number 1 team does not break under fire. These men endure the gunshot and manage to deliver their first direct mortar round against the U.S. troops engaging them from the crest of Point Amos. They are supported in this task by way of suppressive fire from the MG-34 crew in the northeast crop field. From his command post, Lieutenant Eckel observes the effects of his valiant mortar crew's very first attempt at independent fire control.
Obwohl unter dem Feuer von der Ostdeutschung die erste Abteilung der Gefahr mutig begegnete und ihre erste Runde auf den Komm lieferte.
Although under fire from the East Bluff, the first section braved the danger and delivered their first round onto the ridge. From my vantage point, I observed the shell impact atop the rise. It appeared to be a bullseye. I was elated. This was a crucial event for us. I promptly directed the crew to proceed with full fire effect onto those very same coordinates.
Although merely a spotting round, The stragglers' estimated range to target was remarkably accurate. The shell detonates near a squad of GIs positioned within the tree line, thereby causing numerous shrapnel wounds and 3 outright casualties. Encouraged by the success of the initial mortar strike on the east bluff, the MG-34 crew increases the ferocity of their suppressive fire along the ridge. A higher elevation notwithstanding, the soldiers on Point Amos have unexpectedly become the more vulnerable targets of opportunity. However, as with all battles, fortunes can change in a split second, and they do. For the second time in this battle, direct gunfire fells a team member only inches away from the German MG gunner. Now the lone survivor of his beleaguered section, he once again panics and disengages from combat. He flees the crop field with his weapon in hand, oblivious to anything but self-preservation. The stragglers are left to their own fate. Nonetheless, they are quickly bolstered by the activation of the number 3 section. Having witnessed this series of events, the U.S. Scout Jeep is emboldened to reintroduce its .30 caliber medium machine gun into the fray. They proceed to access Route D54 and race to reposition themselves on the east flank of Point Amos. Unfettered by heavy machine gun fire, they can now engage the mortar section that is targeting, with lethal effect, those troops deployed along the southern ridge. To the west, the most significant event of the battle thus far is now underway.
Our preliminary suppression of Point Andy was intense and appeared to serve as quite a deterrent. Sensing no immediate enemy response from the bluff, I signaled 2nd Platoon to commence its advance into the Vale. A mass dash by the entire platoon was both impractical and dangerous. Therefore, each squad would make for the field irrigation ditch individually, in sequence. This tactic would also allow those squads still awaiting redeployment to provide supplemental overwatch fire for those men preceding them into the Vale.
Captain Dorn's plan of attack begins without a hitch. First Squad leaps from its jump-off position along the southern ridge of Hill 146 and heads for the irrigation ditch at quick-time pace. Much to the relief of the entire company, they traverse the distance and arrive at the depression with nary a shot fired in their direction. For Lieutenant Eckel, however, his brief enthusiasm for the success of the stragglers is swiftly tempered by what he witnesses when shifting his focus back to the west.
Meine Sorge über die amerikanische Anwesenheit auf der Ostdeutschung wurde nichts anderes als eine Ablenkung im Vergleich mit den Ereignissen.
My concern over the American presence on the East Bluff became nothing more than a distraction in comparison to the events being set in motion on Hill 146. My attention was abruptly drawn to a group of enemy soldiers running down the face of the slope. They were clearly out in the open, silhouetted against the hill. This is just what we had planned for. Yet, no gunfire was directed at them from the west bluff. Not a single shot. The Americans reached the irrigation ditch, unabated. Dismayed, I communicated with the West Bluff contingent, using the captured wireless radio. I impressed upon them that subsequent waves of enemy soldiers were inevitable, and that it was time they entered the fight. I was somewhat adamant.
Ich war etwas unerbittlich.
Once again, Eckel is correct in his analysis of the situation. Within moments, 2nd Squad of 2nd Platoon is on its way down the southern slope of Hill 146. The Germans atop Point Andy ignore the peril of the massed volley of suppressive fire aimed at them and engage the exposed GIs. With this act, the West Bluff contingent has finally played its hand. They are no longer an unknown quantity to the Americans. Much to the chagrin of the Germans, 2nd Squad manages to reach their destination without so much as a scratch. However, during the move, a single member of 1st Squad becomes a casualty while providing fire support for his platoon mates from the periphery of the irrigation ditch. It is at this moment that the two German assault guns break from cover and take to the field in an attempt to influence the American attack.
Mit Radiosätzen innerhalb unserer Fahrzeuge beide ausgestattet, waren Stug-Mannschaften.
Being equipped with radio sets inside our vehicles, both Stug crews were able to monitor Lieutenant Eckel's transmissions. The enemy was obviously in the process of descending into the vale on the west flank, while harassing the mortar crews from the east bluff. It was clear that the time had come for us to insert ourselves into the melee.
Wir fanden, dass wir etwas tun mussten, den Kurs des Kampfes zu
We felt that we had to do something in order to stem the course of the battle. Both of our Stugs rolled out into open ground from behind the farmstead. Our basic plan of operation was to conduct a bounding maneuver, forward and back, as frequently as possible. In this way, the enemy would have less chance of targeting us with small arms or any artillery at their command. We, on the other hand, could target them at our own discretion.
Anxious to relieve some of the pressure on the west bluff, the No. 2 Stug wastes no time in unleashing 3 consecutive high-explosive rounds onto the southern ridge of Hill 146. All 3 rounds impact the hill, yet surprisingly enough, produce not a single U.S. casualty. During this action, the vehicle withdraws to the tall grass on the fringe of the sunken vale. As for Spitzer and his crew, they hold their ground and their fire, for the time being. Despite the loss of long-range fire support from the MG-34, Eckel's No. 1 mortar section remains cool under fire. Having zeroed in on the crown of Point Amos, the stragglers proceed to lob one 81mm shell after another skyward. Within only a matter of moments, the rounds return to Earth and begin impacting on Point Amos. The sequential effect of these high explosives is devastating. Most of the men in 3rd Platoon's 1st Squad become victims of shrapnel, while yet 3 more GIs are added to the casualty count. Interestingly enough, those combatants least likely to be a battle threat are proving to be the most lethal force in the fray. Heartened by the success and survivability of their comrades, the No. 2 mortar crew regains confidence and begins searching for a new firing position of their own. Meanwhile, the American scout jeep crests the east flank of Point Amos in search of exposed Germans within the hamlet. Having spotted their primary target, the mortar team that is currently doing so much damage, the jeep's machine gunner lets loose with multiple bursts into Enmont's center courtyard, to no immediate effect. Their venture is ultimately abbreviated once they spot Spitzer's Stug lying in wait for a target such as themselves. Once more, they are forced to reverse course and remove themselves from the line of sight of the Vale. Although Company B appears to be accomplishing its fire and maneuver plan of action, Kampfgruppe Eckel is holding their own and holding the field. The Battle of Albeit is shaping up to be a struggle of tactical dominance and of attrition.
You're watching Tales of Virtual Combat on his Story Internet channel.